Did Diavolo deserve it? This is a question I constantly have to ask myself because it's just an interesting thought piece. On the surface level, you might come to the conclusion that yeah, he's the villain, he did horrendous things, he should be punished, and the infinite death loop was deserved. However, critically thinking about it for a moment, looking past the surface level, you start to realize this is just not a JoJo's thought idea. It actually stems into theology, religion, the moral compass, and so much more. This simple question even ends up leading to a much bigger question because of it. Is an eternal hell full of punishment and misery truly justifiable as a punishment after death for living a sinful life? I welcome you to Diavolo and his punishment, the infinite death loop. Now, primarily, I will be looking at Christianity mostly here because, well, most of the characters in JoJo are based off of Christian characters, especially in Part 5. But is it even fair to say the infinite death loop is even comparable to hell? In my opinion, yes, it technically is. The worst version of hell Christianity can make is probably through the Roman Catholic Church and the many offshoots of it, where it basically states, anybody who does not pass general resurrection or last judgment will be sent down to hell eternally because of their sins and will be punished for them, and will be permanently separated from God and burned in hellfire and mingled with demons who are stronger than said person, and God knows what those demons do to those people, but that's more or less what hell is. Hell is absolutely terrifying and supposedly, depending on your sect of Christianity, lasts forever. However, there is something to be noted here. Depending on your sect of Christianity, there is a bright side to hell. It's said during Revelations or on every Sunday that Jesus will basically empty hell and everybody basically gets free redeemed after some time. After Giorno Giovanna and Gold Experience Requiem successfully defeat a person and kill them, quotation marks on that one, said victim will now be placed in this loop and they will continuously die forever in an infinite number of ways for the rest of eternity. Now, to put it into perspective, what does this exactly mean? Well, basically, we'll just use Diavolo here for example, since we're talking about him already. Diavolo will experience every death scenario ever possible within the universe, no matter how horrifying, no matter how stupid, no matter how Looney Tunes it gets, Diavolo will experience that death. Now, I think the reason why people gloss over the whole infinite death loop after reading it once or twice is wrapping your mind around infinity, and in other words, eternity. Placing a never-ending concept like infinity upon somebody for punishment is kind of crazy to think about. The normal human mind can't even comprehend a couple hundred numbers. Try imagining an infinite number that is never ending. Even the biggest number you can think of, like, I don't know, 100 billion is still infinitely smaller than infinite itself, which is crazy even talking about. Now place that number and concept on top of somebody for punishment, and I hope you start to see how weirdly cruel it is. What creature honestly deserves this kind of punishment? Why does Diavolo deserve an infinite death loop? I know he's a bad person, but like, what crime justifies an infinite punishment of eternal suffering? So depending on how you look at hell, the infinite death loop that GER puts upon Diavolo is actually true eternity and is worse than actual biblical hell. Doing a direct comparison of the both of them happen after death, both of them are eternal, both of them cause immense pain and suffering to said victim forever. And since GER only ever does it to Diavolo, we can also say that it only affects the sinned, which leads me down a pathway with two thoughts. Number one being no earthly crime fits the justification for an eternal punishment forever, and number two being the theological case of the problem with hell, as a just God would not justify an infinite hell on the creatures he loves so dearly. Continuing that second point, I genuinely don't think I can actually fully go in depth on this problem, as it requires a PhD in theology and religion that is clearly outside of my jurisdiction. However, I do think I can simplify it and give this thought for you to ponder. If God loves his creatures, why punish them for eternity? Wouldn't it technically be better to punish them until they realize the error of their ways? However, with this first point, I can actually rip into it extremely well. No crime, and I would argue this, in the entire universe does not justify a punishment of infinity, furthermore, an infinite death loop. The only justification for an infinite punishment would be that of an infinite crime, and Diavolo never actually ends up achieving anything of worth with the arrow. So at bare minimum, you can say he attempts to gain a requiem, never truly a requiem. And if he ended up gaining a requiem, I would therefore then justify an infinite punishment. However, he never ends up getting it in the first place, so a punishment of infinity and the death loop is not justifiable. However, he should be punished for his crimes, but the punishment of infinity is unusual and cruel. Furthermore, I would also add, a hell that eternally punishes its people who have sinned in there is also very unusual and cruel, as it is equivalent to the death loop. I truly do believe without a shadow of a doubt, a punishment of eternity and infinity does not exist within this universe, as no infinite crime exists. And did he really truly deserve this for the crimes he did commit? In my humble opinion, no. I don't think any crimes that Diavolo did, or really anybody's crimes in this universe or on Earth, really can justify an eternal punishment like hell or the infinite death loop. But how did Diavolo, even as a villain, get to this place to begin with? What crimes did he commit to eventually get such a harsh punishment from the main character? The character known before the name Diavolo would be born in an all-female prison after a pregnancy of 2 years. Since his mother is a prisoner, she could not keep the baby. Already starting off at a weird point. However, it gets even weirder depending on the adaptation you see. In the manga, the child that would eventually be known to be called Diavolo seems to be normal. However, in the anime adaptation, it already seems like the newborn Diavolo shows symptoms of DID and schizophrenia out of the womb. So off the bat, Diavolo is already on a rough start, but due to this weird upbringing, it gets even worse. He is then sent to his mother's hometown where he will live with the town's priest. For the most part, Diavolo grows up normally, having aspirations to eventually become a sailor, until his mother comes back from prison. In the anime adaptation, thanks to Polnareff giving some insight, this is where Polnareff thinks where Doppio and Diavolo split as personalities. The Diavolo that we all know as the main villain of Golden Wind finally appears, and then proceeds to bury his mother alive after having a psychological break. Total normal reaction. Sometime after that, Diavolo eventually finds Trish's mother, where he bangs her a lot under a different name to keep his identity a secret. Okay, that's just weird too. This is not going in the right direction for this guy. Oh sweet Mary Joseph Jesus. And it definitely gets worse. It's not done here. His adopted priest father would think, hey, my son got game, I should get him a car, and then starts to build a garage extension in the house. Unknowingly, he would find Diavolo's alive mother buried in the ground, and in a total normal reaction, Diavolo would kill his mom, his adopted father priest, several other people, and burn the town, and would fake his own death. After all of that, he would then slip away to Egypt, finding the stand arrows, selling them to Dio, give himself King Crimson, and then slowly start to build up Passion in Italy, becoming a fully fledged mob boss. And while being the gang leader to Passion, he kills his political rivals, sells drugs to a mass amount of people in Italy, and will protect his identity at all costs, killing anybody who tries to figure him out, all while using Doppio as some mechanism to get him from place to place, and then eventually makes Polnareff disabled. He does that too. Overall, looking at Diavolo's history and him as a person, he is the worst. And bold, big letters. He is just the worst. The only saving grace I could give him would be that depending on the adaptation, looking at the manga here in specific, it was only until his mother showed up into his life is where he psychologically broke. If she never did show up, there might be a chance that Diavolo might have grown up normally. However, if you use the anime adaptation, he was fucked from the start. Diavolo deserves punishment. I think we can all universally agree that he is a person that needs to be punished for his crimes, and his list of crimes is numerous. So what kind of punishment does he deserve? While he never gets tried in Italian court for his crimes, he does get a punishment. After battling for the stand arrow for a very long time between Giorno and Diavolo, Giorno ends up winning, evolving his gold experience to gold experience Requiem. And after a short stand clash, Diavolo is defeated. After being defeated by gold experience Requiem and Giorno Giovanna, he is killed with an asterisk next to it, and is placed under gold experience Requiem's secondary ability, the Death Loop. And after a while thinking about it, is this a just punishment for his crimes? Presenting a food for thought scenario here, what if Diavolo eventually ends up in a loop where he can actually redeem himself? Where he doesn't kill his priest's adopted father, where he doesn't kill his mother and entrap her, where he's a good father to Trish. He actually becomes a sailor and was never connected to the mob at all within Italy, where he genuinely lives a good life, like morally good, because he realizes this might be the only chance to actually do something right after having an infinite amount of deaths placed atop of him, because the length of his punishment should eventually end up changing him over time, like it does in real life, but of course this one is the extreme case of it. And even if you don't believe the death loop has long occurring death scenarios, even in quick succession, at one point or another, Diavolo should change as a person because of how extreme this punishment is. No matter the way you look at it, at one point, Diavolo will feel guilty for his punishment and would change at some point for the better, or at bare minimum, at least become neutral, at least. And in the case Diavolo actually gets better as a person because of this punishment, I think any sane person would be like, fine, after so many years of the infinite death loop, experiencing death a numerous amount of times, and him changing as a person for the better, he should be given a second chance. However, in the case of the loop and hell, this is not technically possible. So I come back to my original question. After living a sinful life and dying, is an eternal hell full of punishment truly justifiable for said life? And while yes, I will concede on this point, Diavolo was manipulating time thanks to King Crimson and did get very close to obtaining the stand arrow, so he should at least be tried for the attempt of gaining a Requiem stand. So his punishment should be indeed long, but not anywhere close to infinity or eternity. For a majority of this video, I have been giving out my thoughts on how justice and punishment should be dealt out to villainous people. In the case of a regular man, I don't think any sin on this planet really justifies an eternal punishment. Nobody is doing an infinite crime to then deserve an infinite punishment. Diavolo, on the other hand, gets pretty close, but no. I genuinely don't think he deserves an infinite death loop, which would be equivalent that to of an eternal hell. But you have to remember that is my opinion on justice, and justice varies a lot between people, countries, ethnicities, etc., etc. It varies so much even between us as people. Hell, even when you're speaking about JoJo's, it's kind of crazy what Araki does to his villains compared to other franchises' villains. Araki just ends up choosing to smoke out his rogues gallery, just completely either eliminating them or completely making them retire from villainy, depending on the scenario. But if you look at Superman, for example, and how his authors write him, he usually ends up, saving them or putting them in jail permanently until they break out or something. However, with the Joestars, they immediately either make them retire or they're dead. There's no in between. Extremely black and white for JoJo and Araki in his case. But when it comes to real life and the philosophies here in the real world, we debate constantly about justice and what just means in that justice. I would actually personally say the world we live in is extremely gray to the point I don't think there is a white or a black when it comes to punishment and the justice system wherever it may lie. So I do want to hear your guys' opinion on Diavolo and the idea of an eternal punishment of some kind. Is it just or is it not? And I know a lot of you are probably going to end up saying, of course, Metas, it totally makes sense why an eternal system of punishment is completely wrong and shouldn't exist. Diavolo, of course, didn't deserve the infinite death loop. We all know this. However, I know humanity well enough in the YouTube comment section. There's going to be one guy in here that writes an entire essay worth of words in a comment stating why he does deserve it. And that guy is the example of why just in the word justice gets really, really weird, because everybody has their opinion on what kind of punishment an evil person or any kind of person deserves. Some people think that some evil people can be redeemed. Others think there are worthless trash that should never be even looked upon again. So what does Diavolo deserve? Well, I honestly think it should be probably placed maybe a couple thousand years at most of some type of death loop or some type of hell-like punishment. But I can definitely say that Diavolo never deserved the infinite death loop or deserved this cruel punishment. I do genuinely find it oddly comforting that maybe after death there is some type of reward and punishment system. As a human, it makes me sleep better at night, is the way I would like to explain it. It is honestly pretty perplexing to think about. So I guess after all this, I'll keep on thinking about death, at least in some way or fashion. An alternate title for this video, for funnies, would be like, Giorno's kind of a dick for putting Diavolo in an infinite death loop. Maybe we should put Giorno in an infinite death loop. Can we do that? That'd be interesting. Anyway, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated. See you next one, ladies and gentlemen. Deuces.